This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
All right. This is too much fun tonight.
Yeah, we're just going off the rails. Well, I think we're excited about this chapter. It's a good one.
It is a good one. Chapter 44, Hunted. And our symbol is the Flame of Tarvalin. It's kind of a long read-in. And just as a warning, I'm going to read a lot of this chapter. Sometimes I just can't help it, and in this chapter, I think this may be the first time in all of Watt Spoilers that I actually highlighted 2 full pages.
I have a lot to say, so I might be interrupting you occasionally.
No, that's perfect.
Yeah.
I expect that, because that would be a long time to just read. Anyway, long read-in.
Just a quick comment. The Flame of Tarvalin is Moiraine using balefire? Channeling?
Yeah.
That'd be my assumption.
Moraine's super important in this chapter.
Totally. And Hunted being the darkhounds coming after them.
And we'll get to it, but Moiraine says there's 2 different packs of darkhounds, and they probably weren't sent by the same person.
No, she says there's probably not more than one, because otherwise they would attack each other.
Oh, so it's just a huge... All right, we'll talk about it.
Yeah. There's only one pack. The Gray Men were sent by somebody else.
Take a sip of whiskey. And Perrin climbed off the bed and started dressing, not caring whether Zareen was watching or not. He knew what he intended to do, but he asked Moiraine anyway. Do we leave? Unless you want to make closer acquaintance with Sammael, she said dryly. Thunder crashed overhead, as if to punctuate her sentence, and lightning flashed. The Aes Sedai barely glanced at Zareen. Stuffing his shirt tail into his breeches, he suddenly wished he had his coat and cloak on. Naming which one of the Forsaken it was made the room seem cold. Bael'Zamon isn't bad enough. We have to leave the Forsaken loose too? Light. Does it even matter if we find Rand now? Is it too late? But he kept dressing, stamping his feet into his boots. It was that, or give up, and Two Rivers folk were not known for giving up. Sammael? Zareen said faintly. One of the Forsaken rules? Light. Do you still wish to follow? Moiraine said softly. I would not make you stay here. Not now. But I will give you one last chance to swear to go another way than I. Zareen hesitated, and Perrin paused with his coat half on. Surely, no one would choose to go with people who incurred the wrath of one of the Forsaken. Not now that she knew something of what they faced. Not unless she has a very good reason. For that matter, anyone who heard of one of the Forsaken was loose should already be running for the Sea Folk ship and asking passage up to the other side of the Aiel Waste, not sitting there thinking. No, Zareen said finally, and began to relax. No, I will not swear to go another way. Whether you lead me to the Horn of Valir or not even whoever does find the horn will have such a story as this. I think this story will be told for ages, Aes Sedai, and I will be part of it.
She's about to get a couple of key pieces of information.
She is correct.
Yes. 1, that the horn has been found and blown, and 2, that Rand is the dragon reborn.
Yeah. Perrin says, you're a dumbass, and Moiraine says, I don't have time to listen to this, and she just walks away. Zareen gets ready as well. Perrin gets ready.
Perrin kind of has it backwards, because he thinks Bael'Zamon is the Dark One again.
Right.
So he's like, oh man, Dark One's been free, and we have to deal with the Forsaken, when it's really, they've been dealing with the Forsaken the entire time, and the Dark One has not been free.
I have a speculative question. Does Moiraine know that Bael'Zamon is not the Dark One?
Yeah, totally. She keeps telling Rand that you haven't fought the Dark One, you haven't slayed him. Even when his body falls out, she's like, would the Dark One have a body?
Does she know who, air quotes, Bael'Zamon is?
I think she saw, there was that prophecy with the name within a name that Egwene talks about, but that's not till the end of this book. I really do think that she has a pretty good idea that this is Ishmael, even if she's not absolutely sure.
Just curious what everyone thought.
Yeah. And also, Faile has a very good reason to hang around with them, and it has nothing to do with the horn and everything to do with broad shoulders.
Very attractive young man. But, you got to wonder how much also is the Ta'veren pulling.
definitely some Taveran pulling, and definitely the, like, she is looking for action and something is going down here. There's no doubt about that. I'm not sure that she is admitted to herself why she's
I'm not
following.
laughing at you. I'm laughing at Travis saying Perrin is bae.
He is.
Yeah, he is. And so they're all hurrying out of the inn, and I thought this part was a little interesting, where I'll read this little part. The innkeeper says, "I will send pigeons every day," the stout woman was saying. "No one will suspect me. Fortune prick me, even the white cloaks do speak well of me." "Listen to me, woman," Moiraine snapped. "This is not a white cloak or a dark friend I speak of. You will flee this city, and you make anyone you care for flee with you. For a dozen years you have obeyed me. Obey me now." Nieta nodded, but reluctantly, and Moiraine growled with exasperation.
I mean, the Darkhound followed them to the inn. Sammael's coming to destroy that place.
Yeah. You remember the last inn where Moiraine was like, "Leave."
Yep, it got burned to the
told
ground.
the innkeeper, like, "Get out of here."
That's where she found Min originally.
Right.
In Verlon.
And Min was there, and I forget the innkeeper's name, but Moiraine was like, "You better get out of here." And the innkeeper was like, "No pesky dark friends are going to chase me away," and they burned it the fuck down.
Sure. She did send him enough money to rebuild it bigger, though.
That's true.
So he didn't lose too much.
The Stag and the Lion, Travis, you sharp person. Stag and the Lion in Verlon? Was that Verlon?
Yeah.
"The bay is yours, girl," Lan said to Zareen. "Get on his back. If you do not know how to ride, you must learn by doing, or take my offer." Putting one hand on the high pommel, she vaulted easily into the saddle. "I was on a horse once, Stoneface. Now that I think of it." She twisted around, tie her bundle behind her.
Doesn't she spend, like, most of her life in the cavalry with her father?
You know,
something like that? I thought she spent a lot of her life on the back of a horse.
We don't hear a ton about Saldea.
We get a little bit through Davram Bashir.
But if we imagine it like the life of a Shinaran lord or the female equivalent, what's the female equivalent of lord? Lady. We would have to expect that she had probably been born on a horse. This would be like an expected thing.
Knowing her mother, she would probably keep on riding right up until she, like, had to get off the horse to give birth. I wouldn't be surprised if her mother was actually, like, out riding one day and was like, "Oh, baby." We did miss one quote here where, and we talked about this a little bit last chapter, where Moiraine says, "You can be sure because the Darkhound is dead, Sammael can be sure he will know that means a warder." That's like back a page. And we speculated a little bit on, like, how does a dead Darkhound point to a warder? And I don't think we ever came up with a really good answer other than, like, a normal soldier would have been killed. He might not even know that it means a warder.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about the power-out blade and how that might have something to do with it.
I think this is Moiraine's assumption that... Okay, so she implies heavily that Lan was the one that killed the Darkhound.
Yes.
She also implies heavily that Sammael will understand that because someone who is highly skilled with the blade killed a Darkhound with a power-wrought sword must be bonded to an Aes Sedai. Like, that whole implication is in here.
Yes.
And it's all just kind of incorrect. Like, there's no reason.
No.
Well, I mean, there are reasons to assume such, but it's not necessarily true.
Because we see Perrin take down a Darkhound with nothing but arrows, which aren't power wrought.
Right.
It takes a lot of arrows, but it does work.
We also know that the Forsaken don't know anything about the bonding weave. It's new. It's a new thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and part of it just might be that she doesn't understand how little the Forsaken actually knows.
Right.
She may be assuming that he can figure things out that he really can't.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit like when she uses balefire here. She's like, "I hope he wasn't paying attention to that." And it's like, he probably wasn't. It's not like he has wards set up. He can't detect female channeling at that distance.
No, most definitely not.
So I don't see any way that he would detect that.
She doesn't know what he knows.
Exactly.
So she's assuming that he at least knows as much as her. You know what I mean? Like, or even less. Like, if he knows even like what a novice in the White Tower would know, and inspecting this scene, then he would know that there is an Aes Sedai nearby, where in reality he doesn't know any of that.
Right.
He couldn't make those assumptions because he doesn't know anything about the Bond. He doesn't know anything about warders or modern Aes Sedai. He doesn't know who Lan is.
The legends may be making Moiraine assume the Forsaken can do more than they can actually do.
I think that's what it is.
You know, it's kind of like predicting the future, where you look at like old 40s versions of what they thought 2000 would be like, and they get some things like pretty spot on, like calls, video phones and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And some things like are just way off.
Yeah,
like that doesn't make it. There's no way we'd have flying cars. That just doesn't make sense.
But yeah, if we don't have flying cars,
yeah. And so I feel like there's a similar thing going on there, where like Moiraine's like, oh, they're super powerful, but they can't see anyone channeling anywhere. It's not like they have that ability.
Yeah,
they're people.
And this next part is where we see Perrin saying, "You said he would find out where I am. He knows. The Grey Men." And Moiraine says, "Sammael did not send the Grey Men."
No, as far as I can tell, Ishmael sent all Grey Men. That he is trying to hunt all three boys.
That seems most likely, and I assume that Moiraine says that Moiraine is sure that Sammael did not send the Grey Men because she knows that he sent the Darkhounds, and you wouldn't send both.
There's no need for both.
Right.
And they'd probably just get in each other's way.
Right. And a Darkhound could assassinate just as well as, if not maybe even better than, a Grey Man.
Well, especially a warded Darkhound.
Sure. What would be the point of doing both?
And also, the Grey Men very clearly are after Perrin, whereas the Darkhound was following Moiraine. There's a little more of a shade thrown between Lan and Moiraine here.
Right, she says, I should probably follow through. Sammael did not send the Grey Men, Moiraine said. The Darkhound was his, however. I believe it followed my trail. He would not have sent both. Someone wants you, but I do not think Sammael even knows you exist. Yet. And the next line of dialogue is, "As well I went after you," Lan said, and the Aes Sedai sniffed loudly. In or out?
It's definitely an in.
I actually got an emphatic Facebook message about this recently, where some guy was sure that's sniffing.
Sniffing's in, snorting's out.
Snorting's out.
There's definitely a contingent of people that think all sniffs are in and all snorts are out. But there is disagreement out there. Where I pretty much agree with that. To me, a sniff is an intake of breath. But some people say a sniff can be an out rather than an in.
Moiraine says, "I could wish you were a woman, Gaiden. I would send you to the tower as a novice, to learn to obey." He raised an eyebrow and touched the hilt of his sword, then swung into his saddle, and she sighed. "Perhaps it is well you are disobedient. Sometimes it is well. Besides, I do not think Shiriam and Swan Sanche together could teach you obedience."
I just love all the shade she's throwing in there to Lan.
Yeah.
Great.
This whole scene, Moiraine is basically saying, "You little shit.
Yeah.
I told you not to do a thing. You did it, and now you're gloating."
Because it worked, and it actually did kind of save my life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's okay for you to obey sometimes, but that's not... Is this the first time one of the women is like, I wish I had that guy in the tower as a novice? I feel like
I think that's the first time in the series we've heard it.
Because I feel like that's something a lot of the girls, especially like Nynaeve and Elaine, later started adapting.
Travis says he needs another cloak because it's too cold in that shade. That was too good. But go on. Yeah, I think that does happen later. I wish he had to be a novice. Maybe he would know a thing or two about how to listen. Except, do Nynaeve, Elaine, Egwene, or really any of the women, just...
They're terrible at obeying. They never obey. Are you kidding me? They're the most disobedient.
Right?
That's the whole irony of it, is like, even Moiraine is like, I wish you were a novice so you'd learn to obey. Moiraine, the most rebel of all the Aes Sedai, who's going off doing her own thing.
Yeah.
She doesn't even report to her Amyrlin seat that she's supposedly allies with.
They all have these really, and when I say they all, I mean the primary characters in the Wheel of Time have a lot of similar traits in a lot of ways. Like, they're not particularly obedient. They're not going to follow orders blindly. They have a need to be informed before they do a thing that they're instructed to do. And if they then question it and their questions aren't answered, they're going to do their own thing, which is a reasonable line of thought. And the men and the women are doing that. This isn't a male-female problem. It's a perspective problem.
Well, this takes me back to the whole structure of the White Tower and the fact that the tower is set up to stifle innovation by the Black Ajah. And the most powerful, interesting Aes Sedai and impactful Aes Sedai we meet, Codswain, Moiraine, Varen, all the girls, learn the vast majority of what they know outside of the White Tower. And that's where they become powerful.
That's a great point.
Anyone who stays in the White Tower and learns the lesson is going to be pretty much a robot, just following the default of Aes Sedai and the White Tower.
Yeah.
And then, of course, just the rest of the main Aes Sedai are pretty much useless. And I think that's a deliberate 3,000-year plan by Ishmael.
Yeah.
To undermine and seed the Black Ajah.
So Moiraine says, summing it back up to start this read-in, Sammael didn't send the Grey Men. He did send the Darkhounds. I don't think Sammael knows who you are.
And Perrin starts to panic a little bit.
And Perrin says out loud, I do not understand, Perrin says. And he thinks, I seem to be saying that a great deal, and I'm tired of it. I want some answers I can understand. He pulled himself the rest of the way up, so Moiraine would not be looking down at him, pulling himself up into his saddle. She had enough advantage without that. If he did not send the Grey Men, who did? If a Myrddraal or another Forsaken, he stopped to swallow, another Forsaken light. If somebody else sent them, why did they not tell him? They're all Darkfriends, aren't they? And why me, Moiraine? Why me? Rand is the bloody dragon reborn. He heard the gaffs from Zareen and Naida, and only then realized what he had said. Moraine's stare seemed to skin him like the sharpest steel. Hasty bloody tongue. When did I stop thinking before I speak? It seemed to him that it happened when he first felt Zareen's eyes watching him. She was watching him now, and her mouth hanging open.
She definitely makes him forget his words.
Yeah.
He spends a lot of his time thinking about her instead of what he's going to say next. She's distracting.
There's a funny thing that happens when you fall in love.
Your mind not so much straightforward anymore.
It changes, and I'm just going to leave it there because this isn't a relationship advice podcast.
I also love his assumption. They're all Darkfriends. They're all on the same team.
Aren't they
Why
working
don't they
together?
just talk to each other? Yeah. No, not in the slightest. If I would say that's one of my favorite themes of the series is even though there's a dark side and a light side, nobody works together on either side. It's all chaos. Everyone doing what they think is right and what they think is best, but no one's coordinating anything.
And in response to Perrin's question, Moiraine looks at Zareen and says, You are sealed to us now, Moiraine told the bold-faced woman. There is no turning back for you, ever. Zareen looked as if she wanted to say something, and was afraid to, but the Aes Sedai had already turned her attention elsewhere. Nieta, flee Illian, tonight, in this hour, and hold your tongue, even better than you have held it all these years. There are those who would cut it out for what you could say, before I could even find you. Her hard tone left doubts as to exactly how she meant that, and Nieta nodded vigorously, as if she had heard it both ways. As for you, Perrin, the white mare moved closer, and he leaned back from the Aes Sedai despite all he could do. There are many threads woven in the pattern, and some are as black as the shadow itself. Take care one of them does not strangle you. Her heels touched Aldib's flanks, and the mare darted into the rain, Mandarb following close behind.
That is a non-subtle threat to Nydia, basically saying if you talk, they'll cut your tongue out before I could find you and kill you.
Right. She's saying, if you talk, someone will find you and cut your tongue out before I find you and cut your tongue out.
One of us is going to prevent you from talking, so keep it to yourself.
No one ever say anything about that ever again. And you, Faile. She also directly threatens Faile. Well, not directly, but, indirectly threatens Faile. Where she says, you are sealed to us now.
No turning back for you, ever.
Ever.
And that becomes less of an issue after Rand takes the stone and has declared himself the Dragon Reborn publicly. At that point, Moiraine's not trying to hide that fact anymore. So that really only lasts till the end of this book.
Yeah. But she also totally loses control of the boys somewhere around the Aiel Waste.
Well, she disappears in the Aiel. Yeah, she never comes back from the Aiel Waste.
Well, there's the contention with Rand.
Yes, and Perrin's back in the Two Rivers, so she has no control over him.
Perrin's gone. Rand won't listen to anything that she says.
And she's trying to put people to follow Matt, but he keeps disappearing. She can't keep track of him because he somehow manages to avoid all the eyes and ears the second they turn their back. Lucky of him, isn't it?
She picks the next best possible plan of action, which is assassinate Lanfear.
Well, after the rings, I think that's her only plan of action.
Yeah. I mean,
she talks about, I think there were 3 alternatives.
Shepherding the boys is, I feel like, what she actually wants to do. At this point, that's her goal. To have all 3 and to shepherd them to make the right decisions and this and that.
But the right decisions as she thinks of them as the right decisions, not the right decisions necessarily for the world.
The right, in quotes, decision.
Right.
And I think she quickly realizes, especially when Rand comes into his true power, for lack of a better term, when he comes into his real power as the Dragon Reborn, she realizes that she can't manipulate him anymore. She can't tell him what to do in any way.
I think she figures out that to manipulate him, she must do with him what she does with the One Power. Submit to control.
Yeah.
Guide rather than force. She spends all of her time in these first few books trying to force Rand to do what she wants.
In some ways. And we know there's even a direct quote where she says, I don't I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember this well, but she says something basically like, well, I couldn't control him, and there were only so many ways that I could manipulate him, and in Ruidian, maybe in the gateways, I'm not sure, but she finds out, she sees several different methods that she tried in possible futures, and there were quite a few, and one of them was sleeping with him.
Terrible.
And she says that didn't work out well at all.
No.
The letter? Is that in the letter? Thank you, Sam. I can't remember where that comes from or the exact quote, but I do remember her saying, there were several different methods and none of them work. So there was this one path that I found that was the most important, that would work.
And that's all from the rings that she goes through in Ruidian.
Which is make sure Lanfear doesn't sleep with Rand.
Basically. And I imagine that's a little bit of why it would be a disaster.
I'm saying, I'm emphasizing sleep with, but I also mean manipulate.
I like how Perrin's thinking, I don't know which side you're on, Moiraine. And they looks at Zareen, is like, and what side are you on? I'm thinking, whatever side you're on, Perrin. She's on Perrin's side. That's all into him.
There's a joke somewhere in there, and I'm not going to say it. His bedside, okay.
Which side? His bedside.
I wasn't actually sure what the punchline was, but I decided not to follow it through. Cody says his bedside.
I don't think she's going to stay on the side of the bed. I think she's going to be in it pretty quick.
I noted that Perrin notes in his mind that Zareen was riding alongside him as if she had been born in a saddle, which is where...
Basically was.
Yeah. The rain had stayed long enough to hide their departure, but now it seemed they would have a clear night for riding, which would be perfect if you were being tracked by humans. He said as much, but Lan shook his head. Darkhounds like clear, moonlit nights best, blacksmith. Rain the least. A good thunderstorm can keep them away completely. As if his words had bidden it, the rain faded to a faint drizzle. Perrin heard Loyal groan behind him.
They also don't like crossing running water. Darkhounds are very much like the legends of fairy creatures,
and Myrddraal.
Don't encounter them at crossroads, won't cross running water, all those sorts of things seem to either wash away the magic or just scare them.
Yeah.
Running water is an interesting one. There's a lot of shadow spawn that do not like it. Trollocs, Fades, Darkhounds.
And then a thin howl rose far behind them. For a moment, he thought it was a wolf. He surprised himself by nearly reaching out to the wolf before he could stop. The cry came again, and he knew it was no wolf.
It used to be a wolf.
Others answered it, all miles behind. Eerie wails holding blood and death. Cries that spoke of nightmares. To his surprise, Lan and Moiraine slowed, the Aes Sedai studying the hills around them in the night. "They are a long way," he said, meaning Perrin. "They'll not catch us if we keep on." "The darkhounds?" Zareen muttered. "Those are darkhounds? Are you sure it isn't the wild hunt?" Aes Sedai. "But it is," Moiraine replied. "It is. You can never outrun the darkhounds, blacksmith," Lan said. "Not on the fastest horse. Always, you must face them and defeat them, or they will put you down."
You can't outrun them. If they're hunting you, you have to... I think the only way to escape would probably be to cross some running water or to turn and fight them.
Yeah. And I read the other night while we were doing research together that darkhounds, they don't like the rain, and they especially like the harder it's raining, the less likely they are to come and find you. But once they start the hunt, they don't stop. No. So if they're like just kind of starting their hunt and you cross a river right away, they're likely to give up. But if they're chasing you for miles and it starts raining, forget it. You're still fucked.
And I'm imagining that the darkhounds, like channelers who have been turned, there's nothing left of the original soul. They've been taken over and corrupted. And there's no connection to a wolf brother or the consciousness.
Right, I see them like a turned channeler, but they're a turned wolf.
Right, and there's nothing left of the original personality.
No. I think it's even explicitly stated at some point that they have no memories. Like their soul is different.
Yeah,
now.
I think Hopper says that. Something like that, yeah.
"There," Moiraine said, pointing to a tall, treeless mound well off to their right. And she's basically indicating, like, we're going to go climb this treeless hill so that as they attack us, we'll have a chance of killing them all.
And they see enough, like, squared off bricks and corners that this is probably an old fort that's just been buried over time.
Oh, yeah. When they get to the top, Perrin sees a woman's face.
An Ogier woman. Loyal led his horse over to peer at the carving, then bent closer and felt the features. "I think she was an Ogier," he said at last. "But this is not an old steading. I would feel it."
We all would. And we would be safe from the shadow spawn.
Love the Loyal voice. So, and I love how Perrin and Loyal are like talking about like, "Oh yeah, see that sculpture over there?" And meanwhile, Faile's like, "What? I can't see anything. What are you two talking about?"
Oh yeah, it's because it's Perrin and Loyal.
Right. He's got those big, I think they call them saucer, T-saucer eyes.
Yeah.
That can take in a ton of light. He's like big lenses so he can see in the dark. And of course, Perrin has wolf eyes.
Right. And that is an interesting aside that we could maybe speculate about, but we get nothing on it ever again. Or why there would be a statue of a female Ogier in the north of Illian. And it's
somebody
not
put a long handle on their axe.
Yeah.
That's all I got. Is in one of the previous, probably before the Trolloc Wars, I imagine some Ogier was probably a hero or helped people out. There's no way to know.
Yeah.
No.
If it was a nation or an altar or what.
I like Moraine's line, "Will we leave as much behind?"
Yeah.
Like, legends fade to myth, and this Ogier statue is just another example of lost memories.
And she's saying, I don't know what that is or why it's there, but when this is all over, will anyone remember this much of us? Which is to say nothing except a face.
Yep.
Sam Althor threw out there here in Discord that there are docks built into the spine of the world.
Well, it used to be a
ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. The Aiel Waste was a giant salt flat, which is why shit doesn't grow that well out there. And there are really giant salt flats. It was probably an ocean, or maybe an ocean with some islands at some point.
So here's my question. Do you think this Ogier statue is pre or post breaking? Do you think it's like...
Post.
Do you think it's post? I agree. I thought so too.
Yeah.
But I realized that it really could be pre. There's nothing preventing it from being a pre-breaking statue.
No, there isn't.
There's no like weapon. It's just an Ogier.
It's pretty much a giant salt flat. And there are even septs that name themselves after the amount of salt that is in their lands. But there are some places that do seem relatively fertile, which could happen for a number of reasons. You know, if the Mediterranean drained.
Sure.
there would be different places, and it's a low desert is what it is. And we see that, you know, in the States here, and I'm sure in tons of other places, there are big areas that, you know, you can find fossils of clams in the Rocky Mountains at thousands of feet up and stuff. It's
former oceans turned to deserts fascinate me.
right. There's lots of places on the planet now that are places that used to be an ocean or a sea or a giant lake or whatever.
Yeah, water levels change, land rises. We've seen water levels rise and fall significantly.
And even, yeah, right. Even if just water levels rise, you know, or water levels lower like 50 feet or so, like huge places would be opened up to, and after 1,000 or even hundreds of years, you could maybe even, it would maybe even be relatively arable land if fresh water ran through it.
I'm nodding.
And plus, it's the breaking. It was a magical breaking of
Right.
the world. This isn't even
we weren't talking about geological time. We're talking about over about 100 years.
It would have been like 10
Mountains
male
were
Aes Sedai
raised
that
up.
would have been
Yeah.
like, we don't want an ocean here anymore. And they could have just done that. But it's just...
Just tear a giant hole for the water, like, and the water drains out of something that might be slightly higher than...
Any number of things could do that.
Sure.
There, Moiraine said, is where I left off, pointing to a tall, treeless mound well off to their right. This way they can climb the hill and look down at their attackers.
Because they can't flee, so they have to... She just wants to be able to see them at a distance for the balefire.
And here, I just have highlighted, as they climbed, the horses' hooves clattered on rocks half buried in the dirt and slicked by the drizzle. To Perrin's eyes, most of them had too many squared corners to be natural. So, they're bricks. Very old bricks.
I think of them more as just
Cut stone.
built cut stone, yeah. I don't think they're made out. I don't think they're bricks. Because that's baked clay.
He found himself looking at a weathered stone face 2 paces long, so approximately 6 feet. A woman's face, he thought from the length of the hair. The rain made her seem to be weeping. Loyal thinks she was an Ogier. We talked about this, though. Many nations have risen and fallen since the breaking, Moiraine said without turning. Some, leaving no more than names on a yellowed page, or lines on a tattered map. Will we leave as much behind? The blood-drenched howls rose again.
Not if you don't take out these darkhounds. You won't leave much more than bodies behind.
Perrin tried to calculate their pace, and thought Lan had been right. The horses could not have outrun them after all. They would not have long to wait.
Yeah, and so this is the start of the battle.
Ogier, Lan said. You and the girl hold the horses. Zareen protested, but he rode straight over her. Your knives will not do much good here, girl. His sword blade gleamed in the moonlight as he drew it. Even this is a last resort. It sounds like 10 out there, not 1. Your work is to keep the horses from running when they smell the darkhounds. Even Mandarb does not like that smell. If the warder's sword was no good, then neither was the axe. Perrin felt something near relief at that. Even if they were shadow spawn, he would not have to use the axe. He drew the length of his unstrung bow from the stepper's saddle girths. Maybe this will do some good. Try if you wish, blacksmith, Lan said. They do not die easily. Perhaps you will kill one. Perrin drew a fresh bowstring from his pouch, trying to shield it from the rain. The beeswax coating was thin, and not much protection against prolonged damp. Setting the bow slantwise between his legs, he bent it easily, fixing the loops of the bowstring into the horn nocks at the end of the bow. When he straightened, he could see the darkhounds. I wanted to pause a moment here, because I was wondering if anyone listening understands what that meant. When he slips it in between his legs? Has anyone ever strung a bow by, you feed it, you put it, like you step one leg over it, and the other leg is on the other side, and you twist your body to bend the whole thing, and that's what makes you able to string it? I just wanted to throw that out there, especially for audio-only people, but for you guys, yeah, you can use your leg strength, and you can, like, if it's really hard, you can, like, kind of lower yourself so you're standing on one leg and kneeling down on the bow halfway, and you bend the piece of wood because it's really hard, and that's what lets you... So one side is strung.
Sure.
And the other side you have to loop. So to just hold either end in your hands and bend it forward would be, yeah, some crazy Superman
Perrin
shit.
does it easily.
Well, Perrin can do it, but he's some crazy Superman shit.
Right.
So the way most people are taught, or most people were taught when I was a kid, is that you do the step through. So even if you're a young kid, you can still like literally put your knee down on the wood and you're holding the other end so it bends, and then you can loop it. And then you come off it and it pops back into place.
You just need enough slack to get the loop in place, and then the string will hold it. And that tension is a big part of what goes into firing the arrow. And
even modern recurve bows and stuff, you don't have to worry about this very much. But Perrin is talking about things like the beeswax on the bowstring. This is like a braided vegetable fiber that's coated in wax, and that's what the string is made out of. Where like nowadays it's like a petroleum-based nylon or something that they make these things out of. Like, you're not going to ruin anything.
Do they use animal guts at all?
You can still buy bows that are made in the traditional manner, but for the most part these days they're individually sliced pieces of wood that are enameled together, and then the whole thing has another coating around it. And those are the wood bows. Like, sometimes these days their whole bows are made out of synthetic product, you know.
Oh, sure.
The whole thing. Yeah. And the string is always made synthetic now.
Are there carbon fiber bows? Is that a thing?
Carbon fiber arrows.
Yeah. But I'm guessing
really strong
and lightweight.
What do you call the word? The like impact force.
Compressive strength.
Right. They're really strong in that way. But you can't really bend them. They'll snap.
Although seeing arrows fly through the air, they do quite a bit of bending just by flying.
Yeah, they're really strong and light. It's really strong light. When he straightened, he could see the darkhounds. So when he straightened, that means the bow strung. They ran like horses at a gallop. As he caught sign of them, they gathered speed. There were only 10 large shapes, running in the night, sweeping through the scattered trees. Yet he pulled a broadhead arrow from his quiver, nocked it, but did not draw. He had been far from the best bowman in Emmett's field, but among the younger men, only Rand had been better. At 300 paces he would shoot, he decided. Fool. You'd have a hard time hitting a target standing still at that distance. But if I wait, the way they are moving... Stepping up beside Moiraine, he raised his bow. I just have to imagine that moving shadow is a big dog. Drew the goose feather fletchings to his ear, and loosed. He was sure the shaft merged with the nearest shadow, but the only result was a snarl. It is not going to work. They're coming too fast. He was already drawing another arrow. Why aren't you doing something, Moiraine? He could see their eyes, shining like silver, their teeth, gleaming like burnished steel. Black as the night itself, and as big as small ponies, they sped toward him, silent now, seeking the kill. The wind carried a stink, near to burn sulphur. The horses whickered fearfully, even Land's warhorse. Burn you, I said I'd do something. He loosed again. The frontmost darkhound faltered, and came on. They can die! He shot once more, and the lead darkhound tumbled, staggered to its feet, then fell. Yet even as it did, he knew a moment of despair. One down, the other 9 had covered 2/3 of the distance already. They seemed to be running even faster, like shadows flowing across the ground. One more arrow. Time for one more, maybe. And then it's the axe. Burn you, I said I. He drew again. Now, Moiraine said, as his arrow left the bow. The air between her hands caught fire, and streaked towards the darkhounds, vanquishing night. The horses squealed and leaped against being held. Perrin threw an arm across his eyes to shield them from a white-hot glare like burning heat, like a forge cracking open. Sudden noon flared in the darkness, and was gone. When he uncovered his eyes, spots flickered across his vision, and the faint, fading image of that line of fire. Where the darkhounds had been was nothing, but night-covered ground, and the soft rain. The only shadows that moved were cast by clouds crossing the moon. I thought she'd thrown a fire at them, or call lightning. But this? What was that? He asked hoarsely. Moiraine was peering off toward Illian again, as if she could see through all those miles of darkness. Perhaps he did not see, she said almost to herself. It is far, and if he was not watching, perhaps He did not notice. Who? Serene demanded. Sammael? Her voice shook a little. You said he was an Illian. How could he see anything here? What did you do? Something forbidden, Moiraine said coolly. Forbidden by vows as strong as the 3 oaths. She took Aldib's reins from the girl and patted the mare's necks, calming her. Something not used in nearly 2,000 years. Something I might be stilled, just for knowing. Perhaps? Loyal's voice was a faint boom. Perhaps we should be going. There could be more. I think not, the Aes Sedai said, mounting. He would not lose 2 packs at once. Even if he has to, they would turn on each other instead of their prey. And I think we are not his main quarry, or he would have come himself. We were an annoyance, I think.
So a lot to talk about there.
A ton.
First of all, among the younger men, only Rand had been better than Perrin at shooting. That means Perrin's better than Matt.
Yeah.
With a bow. And Rand, we know, was pretty much...
Although Matt was the kind of quarterstaff kid.
Yeah. And Rand was better than anyone except, like, Thom. He was even better than some of the older men.
And Matt's dad. Was supposed to be the second best.
Abel Cawthon. I notice it takes 3 Two Rivers shafts to the face, armor-piercing shafts to take down a Darkhound.
Which is significant. Another possibly interesting point about bows to people who don't know about them, a long bow is not like any other bow you've ever seen. A long bow is like somewhere in between a bow and a siege weapon. That's serious.
Yeah.
The English longbow is what, like we were talking before, some historians, not all of course agree, but some historians think that even before the crossbow and the musket came, the English longbow, carved out of a single piece of yew, was what started the decline of the knight in plate armor, because at a distance of like 50 to 100 yards, a longbow aimed directly at plate mail will go through the plate mail.
And the person, and the back of the plate mail, and
right.
Probably into the person behind them.
And you can look at this, if anyone's interested in this historically, at that time, and I believe we're talking like 15th century, there are lots of plate mail that are really pieces of art. Some of them are in the Met in New York City that I've seen. I'm sure there are tons around the world, especially in Europe. But at the time, they would take a crossbow or a English longbow carved out of a single piece of yew, and the armorer who made a piece of plate mail would draw the bow in front of the person who's going to buy it and fire it at the plate mail, and there would be a dent left, but it wouldn't penetrate. And then they would, oftentimes you'll see on these really beautiful, frankly, art pieces, but they're also functional plate armor, they would decorate the dent. So there would be intricate carvings around the dent, so they would make it a beautiful sunburst or a star in the night sky or something. But the point was, the dent meant it had been tested by the armorer himself.
Oh, okay. But couldn't you just, like, take a hammer?
Sure.
And, like, make one and be like, oh, yeah, totally tested.
But, you know, the idea was that it had been tested and you could see the dent from the test. So this beautiful thing had been made, and then they would try their best to punch a hole through it. And if that failed, then it was a piece that could be sold. Kind
of reminds me of the CEO of a bulletproof vest company
exactly
getting shot.
Like that.
Yeah.
Exactly like that.
He wore that and got shot just to prove that the vest worked.
So, but then, you know, of course, eventually as technology progressed, the crossbows specifically just got harder and faster than plate mail could handle.
Also, they take way less training.
And I know from personal experience, from being a goofball running around in the woods when I was a teenager, that you can fire a crossbow at like oil barrels and it will go through, all the way through. And some of those are like 200-pound pulls. Like you can't do that with your arm. You have to, you know, there's a little machine that you crank and it draws the thing back and you place the bolt and then it clicks into position and it releases force like it.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a little bit of
It's got a kick.
Yeah.
It's like a gun. They're very similar to guns.
It's a weak gun.
Yeah.
Is what a crossbow is.
Well, and that's where going to Mistborn, the Lord Ruler retards technical progress because he doesn't want folks to get crossbows. Because
easy to kill Aes Sedai with a crossbow, and we've run into that later in this series. The Band of the Red Hand has crossbowmen, and don't the Dragonsworn as well crossbows? Somebody they figure out crossbows.
Yeah, the trick is that
the Dragon's Legion. That's it. Bananas. Thank you.
Matt figures out that special cranking mechanism that like triples the rate of firing of the crossbows.
Oh, that's historic as well.
Just another technological advance with the crossbow. But yeah, once you have crossbows, like a slow knight in armor is just a sitting duck.
Sure, and how much training does someone even need to shoot a crossbow?
None.
Days.
Yeah.
Of shooting at a haystack, and then...
If that, like...
It's very easy.
Technology makes it less necessary to have skills.
Sure.
You know, how many of us know how to, I don't know, think of a machine that does something.
That was a good shot when I was a little kid. I feel like it's really kind of intuitive. If you're an otherwise fairly athletic person who like is spatially aware, you can line up the iron sights of a gun. It's very simple. You put the single point in between the 2 points and put that over the chest of the target, and then you fire, and then you just pull the trigger. It's easy. Anyone could learn this in a couple of days. If you can pick up the gun, you can learn it.
Yeah.
Not saying you're going to be amazing or anything, but you could certainly...
What was that thing Moiraine used? Balefire.
Oh, yeah.
And it's something she said it was something forbidden by vows, almost as strong as the Three Oaths.
Yeah. It lit up the night sky. And what did Perrin say? Noon reigned for a moment or something like that.
And then it was gone.
Yeah.
And I do have one quote from Moiraine. Since it's not from this chapter, but... Since before the breaking of the world, the use of balefire has been forbidden. The White Tower forbids us even to learn it. In the War of the Power, the Forsaken and the Shadowspawn themselves used it only reluctantly.
They did, and that was one of the only kind of contracts between the Dark and the Light during the War of Power, was that at some point they got together and decided that, okay, but we're not going to use this one weapon anymore, because otherwise there won't be something to fight over. It's sort of the nukes of the Third Age.
Totally. Mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
Where does Moiraine learn it? I think we decided it was with Adelius and Van Dien. Whether it was from the books or directly from them, we weren't entirely sure. But she definitely learned balefire in the period of time between when she leaves Matt in the Great Hunt. When she leaves Rand in the Great Hunt and when she returns to him in Falma.
Really? You think that specific?
Because there's a scene where she says, I've learned a few things. I've become more dangerous while I was gone.
She does say that. When's the first time Moiraine uses balefire?
But I thought she'd used it already. Or she was talking about using it. I think I can't remember. I don't remember the scene.
I thought it was here too, Sam. But I'm trying to think. Maybe there was one time before this? We've seen Rand use it. One thing I want to throw out there as people are talking about this is that Moiraine is a wilder. And I wonder if she read about how to do a thing in a book and then figured it out in a way that it would be very difficult to learn how to do a weave from a book, from a description, right? You'd have to see someone do it, have someone train you.
Maybe, yeah. That's a good question.
But I think that Moiraine would be best suited to do something like that because she's a wilder in the way that Egwene tries to do things and sometimes succeeds because she's accustomed to this, and Nynaeve in particular. But there are other examples, Aviendha. And we see this more and more as the books progress, and I'm sure, granted, some of that is because people are pressed and they need to learn how to do these things, so they may open up a little more. But we don't see highly trained channelers ever figure this stuff out because they are steeped in their doctrine.
Totally.
They're not going out there and experimenting in the way that Moiraine is certainly willing to experiment, and Egwene, and Nynaeve, and others. Aviendha, another good example. Rand is probably the best example because he has no examples until he has Asmodean, and then he has examples for just a few things, and he has to figure out the rest.
He may have some knowledge from a former life.
I agree.
Yes.
You know I agree. There's some bleed through where he figures out some things that he shouldn't have been able to. He shouldn't have even known that would work.
So the scene that I was thinking of is actually later in this book, where she says, even the Forsaken cannot stand up to balefire, she said. He wondered if that's what she had used on the darkhounds, which it was. It still made him uneasy what he had seen and what she had said. I have learned things in the last year, Perrin. I am more dangerous than when I came to Emmonsfield. If I can come close enough to Bilal, I can destroy him. But if he sees me first, he can destroy us all, long before I have a chance.
Was that from TGH?
No, that's from later on in this book.
Oh.
Because she's referencing the darkhounds she destroys in this scene, in
Yeah.
that quote. So that's when she's like going after Bilal in the Stone of Tyr.
It would make sense if she learned from Adelius and her sister. They're kind of like where she gets a lot of knowledge from them, and we know that.
And that's really the only time we don't see her during the series, is during the middle of the Great Hunt when she's off with them and traveling. Now, she may have discovered it in some other part of her travels, but as far as we know, that's the only place she really stopped to
That
learn.
seems unlikely. Because we know that she gets a lot of academic information from Adelius and her sister. I forget her sister's name.
Vandine.
But it would make sense that...
They have more knowledge than any place other than the White Tower itself.
Yeah.
And she just got messed up by a couple of Forsaken, Agenor, and really put the hurt on
She
Moiraine.
has to find a way to defeat them.
Exactly.
She needs the Third Age nuke.
She's stepping it up a notch because she knows she's going to be facing Forsaken again.
That's a great point.
Something not used in nearly 2,000 years. So 2,000 years was the Trolloc Wars.
Yeah.
So balefire was probably used by Aes Sedai during the Trolloc Wars.
Or the Dark.
The Dreadlords?
Yeah.
Possibly.
Or both.
This is actually Moiraine blabbing, I think.
This is, Perrin saying, well, who were they after then? Rand? Perrin asked. He could almost feel Zareen leaning forward to listen. If we are not what he hunts, is it Rand? Perhaps, Moiraine said. Or perhaps Matt. Remember that he is Ta'veren also. And he blew the Horn of Valir. Zareen made a strangled sound. He blew it? Someone has found it?
Oh, you poor little falcon. You're screwed now. You came to the party a little too late. They found it already.
The eyes that I ignored her.
No questions.
Leaning out of her saddle to stare closely into Perrin's eyes, dark gleaming into burnished gold. Once again, events outpace me. I do not like that, and neither should you. If events outrun me, they may well trample you and the rest of the world with you.
Conceited much? There's a little bit of conceit in there.
A little, maybe, but...
Yeah. I mean,
I want to say this is a fairly truthful statement.
I think she loses control pretty quickly. I think that Rand is the one who
takes control.
Yes. Eventually. Takes him a long time. But the world is pretty much in chaos for another 6 months. So at this point, Moraine's dropping secrets in front of Faile because she's not letting her get away no matter what. Now that she knows Rand is the Dragon Reborn, might as well tell her about the horn or anything else because...
Right, she was straight up.
Yeah.
You keep your mouth shut or I'll fucking kill you.
Basically. Cut your tongue out.
Yeah, she's straight up.
So with no more Darkhounds, they are going to ride down the coast straight to Tyr.
They move on.
Yeah. No one's chasing them. Grey Men are dead. Darkhounds are dead.
Sammael is ripping his hair out.
And just doesn't care enough to give it personal attention.
Maybe.
Probably didn't see the balefire, because how would he? I don't understand. He wouldn't.
It's a big burst of the power, but honestly, Moraine's biggest bursts...
Not that big.
Tens of miles out of the city. It doesn't seem like it should be felt. Especially not by a man.
Not unless a woman was standing on a high place where she could literally see the weaves. That's about the only...
Maybe that's what she was talking about.
It's like literally
see the flash of light.
Yeah. I guess an hour's ride really isn't that far. And if you're looking out, you could see the whole...
Sammael, I'm sure he does regret not going himself after the Darkhound pack is taken out, because Rand goes there and assassinates him in like a month or something.
Oh, I think it's way longer than that.
Is it? Well, he gets to Tyr, goes to the Waste, comes back.
That's
Oh, then Kyrie and then Illian.
yeah.
Well, he conquers Kyrie and I think he stops back in Tyr and then goes to Illian. And he goes to Illian with like a handful of maidens or something, right?
And he ends up chasing Sammael to Shadar Logoth. So that's book 7.
But that's Crown of Swords.
Crown of
yeah,
Swords.
that's a ways from here.
Yeah.
But how long is that? It's actually not that long of a
Not
period
that
of time.
long, because time compresses pretty significantly from here on out.
Yeah.
You know, we're really at the point where
A chapter is like a half a day
yeah.
for the character or something like that.
I mean, it varies quite a bit, and there are time jumps, but we have about a year left until, you know, like I said, the first 3 books are about a year, and then the last 11 books are about a year.
Does anybody else remember? I think about this sometimes. I remember back in like 2005 or something, like reading a blog post from Robert Jordan where he said, if I have to make Tor invent a new binding process, the last book will be 1 book. And it ended up being 3.
Yeah.
Does anyone else remember that? But Robert Jordan insisted that there will only be 13 books and
12.
I thought it was 13.
Well, there are 14 now, so not
I
counting
thought it was
Newspring.
15. Oh, not counting Newspring. Okay. But the point is that he many times, on many different occasions, underestimated how much he was going to write.
Yes.
He said it was going to be 1 book, and I remember Brandon came out with 3. So maybe it was 2 in 1, or I'm not sure what notes were supposed to be in what book or what, but I'm at the perspective switch, so there's only like 2 pages left,
Yeah.
3 pages left.
So we get Matt, and this goes into Matt in the next chapter as well.
Leaning back against the fallen log, Matt enjoyed the warmth of the campfire. The rains had drifted south 3 days earlier, but he still felt damp, yet right at the moment. So Matt and Thom are chilling at a campfire.
This is post Eludra, so they just got all the fireworks from Eludra, and so
Yeah.
Matt's cutting into them.
They've been moving along, and they got caught between 2 villages at sundown, so they decided to sleep in this little copse of trees. He cuts open a firework.
Which freaks Thom out because of the whole...
And he's like, yeah, it's just rocks and dirt in there.
Yeah. No, it's not just rocks and dirt. It's gunpowder.
It does look like rocks and dirt.
Well, and Thom believes that whole lie that they explode 10
Thom
times as hard
flips
for
out.
air as for fire.
The light burned me, Thom roared. He thrust his harp into its case, as if to protect it from what was in Matt's hand. Are you trying to kill us? Have you ever heard those things explode 10 times as hard for air as for fire? Fireworks are the next thing to Aes Sedai work, boy. Maybe, Matt said, but Eludra did not look like any Aes Sedai to me. I used to think about Master Alvir's clock, that it had been Aes Sedai work. But once I got the back of the cabinet open, I thought it was just full of small pieces of metal. And then he goes on to say, I bet Perrin could make one of those if he worked really hard. And Thom says, unlikely, but, you know, he probably could, because Perrin was trained by a master craftsman, and maybe.
I think he'd have some trouble with the small
Right,
small
Matt is the
things.
jerky little kid to be like, I don't get it, so he rips it apart.
I was that kid. You know how much stuff I took apart? Like clocks,
I
watches,
did that when I was a kid,
electronics.
too.
Like, that's totally a thing creative, intelligent kids do.
When I was around 9 or 10, my mom stopped buying me electronic toys because if I couldn't open them with a screwdriver or other tools, I would hit them with a hammer to break apart the casing to find the electronics inside and see how they worked.
Yeah.
So, Christine, don't come down on your boys too hard when they do that in the future. It just means they're curious and they want to understand, how does this machine speak? I want to understand. I broke it apart. I do have a very specific memory of a electric helicopter that moved and it like spoke, said things, and I broke it apart literally with a hammer. I took apart all the circuits, and then I tried to put them back together, and only some of the functions worked, and not all of them.
But the fun part was then trying to take it back apart again to fix the
And
ones
put
that
it
didn't
back
work.
together and fix
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And then, but it was this like
I never did. It's probably because I hit it with a hammer.
right. You know, I mean, there's a certain amount of like taking it apart doesn't
Right.
work for you anymore.
But Matt was that kid. I never took the phone apart, but I think I probably knew that I would have been in really big trouble if I took the phone apart. Your toys are your toys when you're a kid. Like, you could break them and your parents will just be like, you little jerk. But if you break the phone, that's like, you know,
Often
it's a
much
major
more
household
expensive.
appliance.
Right.
Like, now it's different. Now phones are different. They're tiny computers that we put in our pockets. The ones you could actually unscrew and look at. Send an electric pulse and it would ring. Those were the days.
I will. One of my biggest disappointments with modern technology is that it's very hard to take apart, both in terms of like repairing
next
it.
to impossible.
'Cause
They're
I'm-
not meant to.
Yeah. But even back in the day, I used to be able to like repair my own iPhone screen when I broke it, and I don't feel like I can do that anymore.
Sure.
Back in the day, 5 years ago.
But once I got the back of the cabinet open, I saw it was full of just little pieces of metal. He shifted uncomfortably at the memory. Mistress Elvire had been the first to reach him at that time, with the wisdom and his father and the mayor all right behind her, and none believing he just meant to look. I could have put them all back together, he thinks. Probably not, Matt.
I don't know though. Like with all those little pieces, as long as you take them apart in order, you can put them back together. I would trust Matt to put them back together, honestly.
There's a system.
Yeah. You can take things apart and put them back together if you keep track of all the pieces in the order they come off.
I once rebuilt a 4-cylinder diesel engine, and it was part of a lesson so that I would learn as a young kid how to take a thing apart and put it back together. And it's a 4-cylinder diesel engine is a fairly simple machine, reasonably simple. But with the book and with like a bunch of cups that are labeled, you can take all these things apart and you put the pieces into the cups that are labeled to be relevant to each step, and then you can work your way back through and put the whole thing back together in reverse, right? You should be able to do that. It's an excellent lesson. I think every little kid should do that, boys and girls.
My favorite strategy when I'm taking something apart with a lot of like little screws and small parts, that not like an engine, but you know, like a piece of electronics, is I'll take a strip of duct tape and put it sticky side up, and then every time I take something off, I
that
just
works.
stick it to,
Yeah.
and I stick them to the duct tape in order, and then I just go backwards down the duct tape.
My grandpa taught me we just had mason jars and what do you call it? Painter's tape.
Yeah.
And you just label it step A dash 32G and these bolts. Anyway.
Chapter. So Matt is doing the same thing to the fireworks, which is he's cutting them open, testing them, seeing what they're made of, what the pieces are, how they react when he tosses them in the fire.
And he throws them in the fire, and he realizes that when they're dispersed, they hit the fire and they just go
They just sparkle.
and throw up a heavy smoke and sparkle and make a funny smell.
It's kind of like we were talking about how you can sort of grind the flint on your lighter and then light it and you get this like sparkle that comes up off of it. I
Yeah.
imagine it's a similar type of situation.
Sorry to derail us again, but East Badger, yes, there were some requirements in my family that were like a kind of generally acknowledged thing. One was you have to learn to drive a stick. Another was you have to learn to balance a checkbook. And another was that you have to learn how to take apart a machine and put it back together. But that last part was only for the boys.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah, well, they grew up in the Great Depression and their ideas were different about things. But
Give your girls things to take apart. Encourage them to break it.
yeah, I remember who, by the way, my cousin who I was closest with, Patricia. I'm not shitting you. Her name's Patricia. She's slightly older than me, but she was often not allowed to do the things that I was going to be sent
Why
to do.
is Patricia significant?
It's a family name.
Oh, female Patrick. Got
Yeah.
it. Yeah, okay. That should have been obvious to me.
My father's mother's name was Patricia, but we also had a great uncle that was named Patrick, and they were both, I don't know. We were both named after them. And I remember when she was a little girl, I would be sent to do things that I was like loath to do, It's like, oh, great. Like, my big privilege today is I have to go work all day. And Trisha would cry because she wasn't allowed to be included in the,
That sucks.
Well, yeah, sometimes it was also like cutting down a tree and chopping it into pieces and then neatly stacking it into a dumpster, which wasn't fun, but she wanted to be included and she wasn't allowed to be because Grandma Patricia was she was the toughest motherfucker I ever met, but she had Victorian values, like old school.
Yeah. And
she was like, no, ladies don't do that kind of work, so you're going to stay here with me and do these things with me today while the men go do this. And that was very much like a thing that she laid down. And even my grandpa, the retired Marine, didn't argue with her, so that tells you something.
So what you're saying is she's Mistress Luhan?
Yes. Yeah. Like, you think Master Luhan is scary?
Nope.
No.
Are we ever going to finish this chapter?
I don't know. I did say sorry for derailing us before I started that tangent. But I don't know. I'm not really that sorry.
No. I've lost track of where we are.
Matt cuts the firework open. I read the part where Thom yells at him, and Matt talks about the clock, and Thom doubts he could have put it back together. Thom yells at him some more, and Matt says, well, didn't blow up, did it? More or less. And Tom's like, that's not the point.
If I wanted to take those kind of risks, I go to Camelin and pinch the queen on the butt. At least then I get to pinch the queen on the butt before I died.
Right? At least then I would be able to choose when I die.
Right.
I think this is the point he's trying to make.
And also, like, then at least I get something out of it, as opposed to just getting blown up in your random, like, scheme.
Yeah. Oh, I have a part to read here, and we're almost done. Because they're sitting there at the campfire arguing when a group of people walks up, once again led by a woman.
This reminds me a lot of the scene where Rand takes out the caravan.
That's why I say once again.
Yeah. I get the feeling that
it looks a lot like that scene.
A lot like that scene. I think it's the same kind of group in the same kind of cover, and they absolutely would have, if Rand hadn't done what he did.
Rand executes like 9 people, but in this case it's a few less, but still. A group approaches them, and I fear we are out late, young master, she said, and this is a woman leading a group of men. And I would trouble you for directions to an inn, if you know one. He grinned and started to rise. He had made it as far as a crouch when he heard one of the men mutter something, and another produced the crossbow from under his cloak, already drawn, with a clip holding the bolt. Kill him, fool, the woman shouted, and Matt tossed the firework into the flames and threw himself toward his quarterstaff. There was a loud bang and a flash of light. I said I, a man cried. Fireworks, fool, the woman shouted, and he rolled to his feet with a staff in his hand to see.
She is the most dangerous.
With a staff in his hand to see the crossbow bolt sticking out of a fallen log almost where he had been sitting, and the crossbowman falling with the hilt of one of Thom's knives adorning his chest. It was all he had time to see, for the other 2 men darted past the fire at him, drawing swords. One of them suddenly stumbled to his knees, dropping his sword to claw at the knife at his back, and he fell face down. The last man did not see his companion fall. He obviously expected to be one of a pair, dividing their opponent's attention, and he thrust his blades at Matt's middle. Feeling almost contemptuous, Matt cracked the fellow's wrist with one end of his staff, sending the sword flying, and cracked his forehead with the other. The man's eyes rolled up in his head as he collapsed. From the corner of his eye, Matt saw the woman walking toward him, and he stuck a finger at her like a knife. Fine clothes you wear for a thief, woman. You sit down till I decide what to do with you, or I'll... She looked surprised. Surprised as Matt, at the knife that suddenly blossomed out of her throat, a red flower of spreading blood. He took a half a step, as if to catch her as he fell, knowing it would do no good. Her long cloak settled over her, covering everything but her face and the hilt of Thom's knife. Burn you, Matt muttered. Burn you, Thom Merrilin. A woman? Light. We could have tied her up, given her to the Queen's guards tomorrow in Camelin. Light. I might even have let her go. She'd rob nobody without these 3, and the only one that lives will be days before he can see straight and months before he can hold a sword. Burn you, Thom. There was no need to kill her. The gleeman limped to where the woman lay and kicked back her cloak. The dagger had fallen from her hand. Its blade was wide as Matt's thumb, and 2 hands long. Would you rather I had waited until she nested that in your ribs, boy?
So that's a long, thin dagger.
Yeah.
Right in his heart.
It's for stabbing.
Stabbing. Yeah, Matt definitely underestimates her.
He retrieved his own knife, wiping the blade on her cloak. Matt realized he was humming. She wore a mask that hid her face, and stopped it. He bent down and hid hers with the hood of her cloak. Best we move on, he said quietly. I do not want to have to explain this if a patrol of the guards happens by. With her in those clothes, Thom said. I should say not.
Well, they are not robbers, is the whole thing. They're not thieves.
Yeah.
So it's not that they robbed a noblewoman. It's just that she is a noblewoman who also happens to be a dark friend.
Thom says that he suspects that they probably robbed some noblewoman and stole all her shit, and that's why they have nice weapons and this woman has nice clothes. But it's actually much more likely that she is a noblewoman, and these are her retainers, and she's bringing them to assassinate Matcham Cawthon. Because
this is the assumption that they've been chased by these quote-unquote robbers, but it's not. It's never been robbers. No one's after Matt's gold or the letter.
And, you know, at some point in this chapter, I think Matt curses Elaine for having him carry this letter that makes him so important. And, of course, we've talked about this in earlier episodes, but Matt won't realize until way later that it wasn't Elaine's letter. Nobody cares about Elaine's letter. Even Mergace at this point doesn't care about Elaine's letter. It's Matt. People are being sent to kill Matt. They don't care what he's carrying.
No, and they're being sent by Ishmael.
Yes.
You know, these are all Darkfriends, probably at the dream in the beginning when the Tarvaliner was killed and faded to nothing. You know, these may be other folks who have similar orders.
Or, right, Darkfriends who are getting orders from the Darkfriends that Ishmael threatened is kind of what I'm imagining.
Or he was in their dreams somehow. So, I think he's just going from Darkfriend dream to Darkfriend dream. And then this next little bit is something I'd brought up before on the boat. So when they were fleeing Tarvalin, the ship was attacked.
Oh, yeah. I was going to read this whole part, but let's talk about it, and then I'll just read the first part anyway. So one guy, there was a woman who talks to Matt, and then one guy, Matt sees step like behind her and pick up a crossbow and face it toward Matt. And then there's another 2 men who circle around with swords. The guy with the crossbow is one of the 2 men who jumped off the boat and swam ashore.
Right.
One made it, and that's the guy that's holding the crossbow right now.
At least one made it.
When Thom and Matt jumped on the boat that was leaving Tarvalin.
And that's when Thom goes, should we kill the rest too? And that panics them, and that's why they jump overboard.
Right.
And he's like, fools, they'll never make it to the shore. And so this is Matt referencing that event when he's like, yeah, one of them made it.
Matt's thinking about how he hates seeing the dead woman, but he doesn't like seeing the dead men very much either. And he's thinking about not wanting to look at them, and then he has a thought. He found himself looking at the man who had shot the crossbow. There was something familiar about those features, about the way smothering fire made shadows across them. Luck, he told himself. Always the luck. The crossbowman was a good swimmer, Thom, he said, as he climbed into the saddle. What foolery are you talking now? The gleeman was on his horse, too, and far more concerned with how his instrument cases rode behind his saddle than he was about the dead. How could you know whether he could even swim at all? He made it ashore from a small boat in the middle of the Aranon, in the middle of the night. I guess he used up all his luck. He checked the lashings on the roll of fireworks again. If that fool thought one of these was I, said I wonder what he'd have thought if they all went off. Are you sure, boy?
I don't think he'd think anything. Most likely he'd think,
they'd
ow.
all be dead.
Yeah. Ow, ow, bang.
Are you sure, boy? The chances of it being the same man... Why, even you wouldn't lay a wager against those odds. I am sure, Thom. Elaine will wring your neck when I put my hands on you, and Egwene's and Nynaeve's too, and I am sure I intend to have this bloody letter out of my hands an hour after we reach Camelin. I tell you, there is nothing in that letter, boy. I played dice tomorrow when I was younger than you, and I can recognize a code or a cipher when I don't even know what it says. Well, I never played the great game, Thom, your bloody game of houses, but I know when something is chasing me, and they'd not be chasing this hard, or this far, for the gold in my pockets, nor for less than a chest full of gold. It has to be the letter.
It's not the letter.
Burn me. Pretty girls always get me into trouble. Do you feel like sleeping tonight after this? With the sleep of an innocent babe, boy. But if you want to ride, I'll ride. The face of a pretty woman floated into Matt's head, with a dagger in her throat. You had no luck, pretty woman. Then let's ride, he said savagely.
And I'd like to also make a point with this group of bandits. There was one who attacked him in the streets of Tarvalin on his lucky night, and one of that party ended up on the ship, and then one of that party ended up here. So
that guy was really lucky, actually.
Well, it's not the same guy all the way through. Because I
thought you were talking about the crossbowman.
Well, so it's two different guys. So there's one guy he recognizes on his lucky night, and then again on the ship, but he kills him.
Okay.
It's one of the guys in the corridor.
He recognizes one of the people that attacked him that night.
Exactly. So it's not the same guy in all three instances, but there's one guy who ties group 1 and 2 together, and another guy that ties group 2 and 3 together, which means group 1, 2, and 3 are all the same. Yeah, so it's all part of the same group as to whether or not he doesn't recognize the same person all 3 times.
Yes. One of the guys that jumped off the ship, one of the 2 that jumped off the ship, is one of the guys.
One of the crossbowmen.
Is the crossbowman in this scene.
Yeah. So there's a thread all the way through. And I think they're all dead now. There's no this group is dead, as far as I can tell. He's not pursued anymore.
No, until he gets a tear. Yeah, we're gonna have a 1 hour after show.
All right.
Except not, because all the politics shit we just cut. Despite your religious, political, whatever beliefs that you have.
Not despite of, because of. Why did we start talking about politics? We're usually really good at avoiding it.
We started talking about the Whiskey Rebellion because we were talking about whiskey.
Oh, that's right. We started talking about history, and then Dan Carlin went from history to politics. And then we got a little... We started talking about Dan Carlin's politics.
Christine says it was the whiskey. She's probably right.
Yeah, although, I mean, we're just barely tasting it.
Yeah, I had a whiskey, and I had my shift drink.
And barely tasting it, I mean, we've gone through like half the bottle. It's only 2 cups in the bottle, so we've like split a cup, which means we each have...
A cup is 8 ounces, so...
Yeah, and we split a cup, so we've had like 4 shots each. Well, an ounce is not a shot. A shot is an ounce and a half, so it's like 2 plus shots each.
I consider a shot to be 2 ounces, but that is really actually a hefty shot in most places.
Yeah.
30 milliliters? Is that what 2 ounces is?
Give or take.
Googling that.
30 ml to ounce.
Chrome wasn't open. And loaded.
Yeah, so 30 ounces is 1.01. 30 milliliters is 1.01 ounces.
Oh, so that's an even smaller shot.
So that's a small shot. So we're talking...
In some bars in Portland, that would be considered a half shot, or 2/3, somewhere around there.
Dude, I feel like a lot of the shots that they pour here are basically like mixed drinks.
2 ounces or sometimes more.
Yeah, they'll pour you like a 4-ounce shot, but with like 2 ounces of alcohol in it.
I had a shot of rye the other night when I was out just like catching up with Francis, and I swear it was like 3-4 ounces. It was like a fucking cup of whiskey.
Right.
And I hit the table and I was just like, okay.
Here's your tip.
Where not my night's going. It's whatever. We just hung out and watched cartoons after that. So Also, Radio Room has a steak. Did you know that? They cooked
Yeah.
it really well.
Yeah. They have a really mixed bag on their food.
It's weird. It was weird. I mean, it was good, but it was...
There's such a high pass-through that, like, sometimes they do a really good job and sometimes it's just, like, barely thrown together.
I've noticed that
Probably depends on who
when
the
I
cook
go
is.
order, like, one plate consistently, you know, a couple times a week for a while or something like that, the meat will even be cut in very different ways.
Yeah.
Which it shows...
Inconsistency in training.
Yeah, a bad kitchen manager
Yeah.
is what that is.
Well, I mean, I get the feeling that that it's a high turnover place. It's a big place.
Probably.
They probably do the minimal amount of training to get people up and running. And frankly, it's not about the food. It's about the space, the booze, and
Right.
like
It's about hanging out there.
hanging out and like just having something to eat. So, you know, it's clearly like it's sustenance food, but quality control and consistency is not what they're looking for.
You know, Christine, I've been getting into gin a little bit recently. It's not the worst thing ever. I don't like vodka very much, so I always avoided gin because it's very similar. But
It's flavored
there are
vodka.
some flavorful gins out
Yeah.
there that are okay with me.
I love a good gin and tonic.
Really, I like whiskey a lot.
Oh yeah, a gin and tonic needs lime. There's no doubt about that.
It tastes like the bitter part of a Christmas tree.
I shower daily. I don't miss a day without a shower. But I don't use soap.
Oh, so I don't usually use
There's
soap.
no soap in our bathroom. It's really kind of funny. You walk in and it's like
I think there's hand
there's
soap.
hand soap. Sorry, I should say in the shower.
Yeah,
The shower has no product in it whatsoever.
because it's just me and Seth's. Jules doesn't really shower here very much.
No shampoo.
We both have shaved heads and beards. You don't really want to shampoo your beard. It's a dryer. It's different. It's different hair.
And I long ago realized that my skin did way better if I didn't use any sort of soap on it. Like I would get like dry, cracked skin.
I have products that my barber has started talking me into. There's a oil that you can put into your beard, and it's basically for if you wash a lot. Like if you're get in the shower a bunch, your beard will dry out and get like fluffier and harder to like keep a shape.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is like if you're in hot water a bunch, you can reapply this oil to your beard and it makes it like a nice shiny, like makes the color come out and keeps it like moldable and it doesn't make your girlfriend's face angry,
Right.
which is the most important thing. I started buying it all the time when Julia was like, I can tell that you didn't put beard oil in. And
Well, it's also
I was
a
like,
smell
okay,
thing.
I'm going to go
Yeah.
buy some.
I find just like olive oil or vegetable oil works pretty much just as well. Just a couple of drops and then you rub it in.
There was one time where I ran out and she was like, seriously, you got to go get some right now. And I was like, I don't know if I want to go all the way. And I was like, I bet coconut oil would do the same job.
Oh,
and I
yeah.
tried it and it worked.
Vaseline works pretty well too. Basically, any oil that you can like put in your beard to prevent it from drying out helps keep it from getting brittle.
Well, bananas, you might want to try oiling it and maybe she wouldn't be so anti-beard because I think the straight ladies that are anti-beard are probably against it because it's scratchy.
Right. There's a certain length too.
It's like annoys their face. If your face is going to be in their face all the time, you don't want to be that scratchy.
My whole thing with Jessica is if I shaved, I had by like middle of the day, I had stubble that gave her razor burn.
Yeah, which is like understandable.
Totally.
And when you cut that hair, it's sharp.
Pokey, yeah. And so you either have to like be super, super smooth shaved or let your hair get long enough that it's no longer an irritant.
Yeah.
And you keep it long and soft, you're fine. But the fact is, soap has the opposite effect. It dries it out and makes it pokey. And we're going way too much detail, but I think you and I have we have better skin than a lot of people we know because we don't strip the oils off of it with soap.
Well, yeah, I have. I don't think I've ever said this on the podcast before. I have skin problems. Like if my skin gets dried out, I get rashes and stuff.
I always want to call it eczema, but that's not right.
Eczema.
Eczema, thank you.
If my skin gets dried out, if I, get exposed to harsh chemicals, including soap, a lot.
I'm very particular about unscented, uncolored detergents for my clothes and for cleaning products as well.
Those are the reasons we're against soap.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?